My stepchildren called me Plan B Dad because I was just the wallet when their mom needed money. They were 18 and 19, refusing to get jobs, living off me while corrupting my own kids. I gave them 60 days to leave. They laughed and posted online that I had no power over them. 4 months later, a sheriff escorted them out with nothing but trash bags. Then I made sure every door they tried to open slammed in their faces. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served legally, methodically, and so completely that the people who wronged you spend years understanding exactly what they lost. This is the story of how two entitled adults called me Plan B Dad, drained my bank account, poisoned my children, and learned the hard way that backup plans sometimes become the main event. And when they do, they come with consequences that last a lifetime. My name is Marcus. I'm 45 years old, a mechanical engineer who's spent 2 decades building systems that don't fail. I'm also a father of 2, Noah, who's 15 now, and Ella, who's 13. 6 years ago, I married Lydia, a woman I met through mutual friends after both our marriages ended badly. She came with 2 kids of her own, Derek, who was 12 when we met, and Haley, who was 13. When we decided to blend our families, buy a house together, and build something new, I genuinely believed we could make it work. I thought structure, patience, and love could overcome anything. I was wrong about the love part, but I was right about the structure. The first year was actually decent. We had family dinners, game nights, and trips to the lake. Derek and Noah played basketball in the driveway. Haley and Ella did craft projects together. I helped both stepkids with homework, taught Derek how to change a tire, and showed Haley how to use power tools when she said she wanted to build a bookshelf. Lydia and I worked as a team, splitting parenting duties, presenting a united front. It felt like we were actually building a family, not just 2 separate units coexisting under one roof. But somewhere around year 2, cracks started forming. Derek began rolling his eyes when I asked him to take out the trash. Haley developed selective hearing whenever I spoke. I chalked it up to normal teenage rebellion. They were 13 and 14, navigating a blended family, probably still processing their parents' divorce. I told myself to be patient, to not be the stereotypical evil stepdad who comes in too hard with rules, so I gave them grace. Looking back, that grace was the first nail in my coffin. By the time Derek turned 17 and Haley turned 18, they weren't just testing boundaries. They were living in a completely different reality than the rest of us. Neither of them had ever held a job, not one, not even a summer position at a fast food place or babysitting gig. Derek had dropped out of high school in his junior year with Lydia's tearful blessing, claiming he'd get his GED when he was ready. He spent his days and nights gaming, screaming profanities into his headset at 4 in the morning, sleeping until 3 in the afternoon. Haley had technically graduated from high school but barely and refused to work or pursue any education. She spent 12 to 14 hours a day on her phone, making TikToks for her 200 followers, buying clothes online with money she'd guilt out of Lydia, treating our home like a resort with free room service. And here's the part that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. They contributed absolutely nothing. Not $1 to rent, groceries, utilities, or car insurance, which I was paying for vehicles they drove freely. Not a hand with chores, cooking, cleaning, or yard work. Nothing. They were legal adults living completely off my income while treating me like an ATM with a bad attitude. But what truly pushed me to the edge wasn't just the financial drain or the disrespect toward me. It was watching them systematically corrupt my own children. Noah, who used to be responsible and respectful, started talking back to me. Derek doesn't have to do chores. Why should I? When I'd tell him that Derek was older and different rules applied, he'd roll his eyes just like Derek did. That's not fair. You just don't like them because they're not really your kids. That one hurt. Ella was even worse. She started failing classes because Haley told her school was a scam and that she should just focus on her brand. Ella was 11 years old and talking about building a social media brand instead of doing her math homework. I tried talking to Lydia, over and over, but every time I brought up Derek or Haley's behavior, she'd get defensive. They're still processing the divorce, Marcus. They need time. I'd point out that the divorce was 7 years ago, and they are legal adults now. She'd accuse me of being too rigid, too controlling, of favoring my own kids. "You've never really accepted them," she'd say, tears in her eyes. And that would be the end of the conversation because I couldn't bear to hurt her more. So the situation festered, and I started to resent not just Derek and Haley, but Lydia too, for choosing to enable them over protecting our family. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March, nothing special. I'd grilled steaks for dinner, good ones, expensive cuts I'd picked up because I was trying to do something nice for the family. Everyone was at the table. Derek had his phone out, ignoring the no phones at dinner rule we'd established years ago. Haley was picking at her food like I'd served her prison slop. Noah and Ella were quiet, sensing the tension that had become our new normal. I was trying to make conversation, asking about everyone's day, getting grunts and one-word answers. Then Haley's phone rang. She answered it, right there at the dinner table, started FaceTiming with a friend. I asked her, politely, to take the call in the other room or call back after dinner. She waved me off without even looking at me, like I was a servant asking to refill her water glass. I heard her friend ask who made dinner, and I heard Haley laugh, this sharp, cruel laugh, and say loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, Plan B Dad made steak tonight." That's what we call him. Plan B, because he's just the backup for when Mom's bank account runs dry. Derek laughed into his water. Haley's friend cackled on the phone. And I just sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, feeling like someone had punched a hole through my chest. Noah looked mortified. Ella stared at her plate. Lydia's face went bright red and she stammered, "Haley, that's really inappropriate." Inappropriate. That was the word she chose. Not cruel, not acceptable. Inappropriate, like Haley had used the wrong fork. I set down my utensils very carefully. I looked at Haley, then at Derek, then at Lydia. And I said very calmly, "Plan B. Dad appreciates you clarifying your position. Enjoy the steak. It's the last free meal you're getting from me." Then I stood up, walked to my home office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just opened my laptop and created a new document. I titled it Plan B Exit Strategy, and I started writing. That night was the beginning of the most calculated, methodical, and satisfying campaign of consequences I've ever executed, because I realized something sitting in that office. Derek and Haley weren't kids anymore. Derek was 17, but would turn 18 in 3 weeks. Haley was already 18. They were legal adults who had chosen to disrespect me, drain my resources, and poison my children. And I was done being Plan B. For the next 60 days, I documented everything with the precision of someone building a legal case, because that's exactly what I was doing. Every time Derek screamed obscenities at his mother and called her pathetic for choosing that asshole over her own kids. Every time Haley stole cash from my wallet, and yes, I started marking $20 bills with invisible ink to prove it. Every time they threw parties when Lydia and I went out, we left the house trashed with beer cans and cigarette burns on the furniture. Every text message where they mocked me to their friends. Every Instagram story where they bragged about living rent-free forever. I kept a spreadsheet, date, time, incident, evidence, screenshots, photos, and videos from our home security cameras. I captured Derek threatening to beat my ass if I didn't stop harassing him about getting a job. I recorded Haley telling Ella that I was just the money guy, not real family, so his rules don't matter. I also consulted a lawyer, not the family attorney Lydia used for estate planning, but my own, a guy who specialized in property law and tenant rights. He explained something crucial. Once Derek turned 18, both he and Haley would be legal adults living in my home without a lease agreement and without paying rent. I could give them written notice to vacate, and if they refused, I could file for formal eviction through the courts. It would take time and cost money, but it was entirely legal. He also advised me to document everything in case they tried to claim I'd made the home unsafe or abusive. But I couldn't move forward without Lydia. If she fought me on this, it would destroy our marriage. So I waited for the moment when even she couldn't deny what her children had become. That moment came about 3 weeks into my documentation phase. Lydia came home early from work one afternoon and found Haley in Noah's bedroom. They weren't just hanging out. Haley was showing my 13-year-old son how to use photo editing software to fake bank account screenshots. When Lydia asked what they were doing, Haley laughed and said, "Relax, Mom. It's just a trick to get more birthday money out of Grandma. Everyone does it." Lydia lost it. She dragged Haley out of Noah's room, sent her upstairs, and called me at work. Her voice was shaking. "Marcus, I need you to come home. Now." When I got there, she was sitting at the kitchen table, face pale, hands trembling. "You were right," she whispered. "They're not just disrespectful. They're not just lazy. They're teaching our kids to lie and steal. They're toxic." That night, after all 4 kids were in their rooms, I showed Lydia everything I'd compiled. Page after page of documented incidents, dates, times, evidence, theft, verbal abuse, property damage, and corruption of minors. She read through it all, her face cycling through shock, horror, and something that looked like grief. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "What do we do?" I laid out the plan. Derek had just turned 18 2 days prior. Both he and Haley were now legal adults. We would give them formal written notice that they had 60 days to vacate the property. No negotiations, no conditions. 60 days to get jobs, save money, and find somewhere else to live. If they refused or failed to leave by day 60, we'd file eviction paperwork through the courts. Lydia hesitated. What if they have nowhere to go? What if they end up on the street? I looked at her steadily. Then they'll figure it out like every other adult in the world. Their father is still alive. They have friends. They're both able-bodied and capable of working. What they can't do anymore is live here for free while destroying our family. She cried, but then she nodded. "Okay, let's do it." I drafted formal notices the next day. They were professional, clear, and legally sound. Each notice stated that Derek and Haley, as legal adults living in our home without a rental agreement or lease, were required to vacate the property within 60 days from the date of the notice. It included the date, both our signatures, and a statement that failure to comply would result in formal eviction proceedings through the county court system. I had them reviewed by my attorney before printing them. That evening, I called a family meeting. When Derek and Haley came downstairs, already annoyed at being interrupted from their screens, I handed each of them a sealed envelope. "This is your 60-day notice to vacate the property," I said calmly. "You're both legal adults now. It's time to find your own place to live." Derek opened his envelope, read it, and laughed out loud. "Are you serious right now? You can't kick us out. This is Mom's house, too. You have no power here. Plan B." Haley looked at Lydia with theatrical shock. "Mom, you're really letting him do this? You're choosing him over your own children?" Lydia's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "I'm not choosing him over you. I'm choosing to stop enabling you. You're adults. You don't work, you don't contribute, and you're teaching Noah and Ella that disrespect and manipulation are acceptable. I love you, but I can't keep doing this." Derek stood up so fast his chair fell over. "This is bullshit. You can't make us leave." I kept my voice level and ice cold. "We can, and we will. You have 60 days. I suggest you start looking for jobs and apartments. The clock is already ticking." Haley started crying, not real tears, but the manipulative kind she'd used on Lydia for years. "You're both horrible. I'm going to tell everyone what you're doing. Everyone will know you're abusive." I smiled, actually smiled. "Go ahead. Make sure you mention the part where you're 18 and 19, living rent-free and teaching 13-year-olds how to commit fraud. I'm sure that'll get you a lot of sympathy." They stormed off to their rooms, and for the next 60 days, they did absolutely nothing. No job applications, no apartment hunting, no packing. They acted like it was a bluff, like we'd cave at the 59th day, the way Lydia always had before. They doubled down on the disrespect, blasting music at all hours, leaving messes everywhere, and posting on social media that I was an abusive stepdad trying to make them homeless. Haley's posts got traction, and some of her followers and their parents started calling our house, yelling at us. I calmly explained to each one that they were legal adults who'd been given proper notice. and if they wanted more information, I'd be happy to share the documentation of why this was happening. Most stopped calling after that. On day 61, when they still hadn't packed a single box, I went to the county courthouse and filed formal eviction paperwork. I paid the filing fee, submitted copies of the signed notices with proof they'd received them, and attached a summary of the documented behavior. The clerk looked at me sympathetically. "You're evicting your stepkids?" I corrected her. "I'm evicting 2 legal adults who refuse to contribute or respect boundaries." A court date was scheduled for 3 weeks later. When the official court summons arrived via certified mail, Derek signed for it, read it, and laughed again. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. No judge is going to side with you. We're family." I didn't respond. I just added his reaction to my documentation file. The court hearing was one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. Derek and Haley showed up in sweatpants and hoodies, looking like they'd just rolled out of bed. Lydia and I wore business attire. My attorney was with us, and we had a 3-inch binder of evidence. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen every excuse imaginable, reviewed the file and asked Derek and Haley directly, "Did you receive written notice to vacate the property 60 days prior to this hearing?" Haley crossed her arms defensively. "Yeah, but it's not that simple. He's not even our real dad." The judge cut her off. "I didn't ask about your family dynamics. I asked if you received proper legal notice. Yes or no?" "Yes," Derek muttered. "And did you vacate the property within that 60-day period?" "No, but did you pay rent or meet any conditions to remain?" "We're not tenants. You're legal adults living in someone else's home without a rental agreement or financial contribution. That makes you residents subject to eviction proceedings. This eviction is granted. You have 30 days to vacate. If you fail to comply, the sheriff's department will enforce removal. Next case." The gavel came down. Just like that, it was over. Derek's face went from smug to pale in seconds. Haley started to cry, turning to Lydia. "Mom, please do something." Lydia looked at her daughter and said quietly, "I did. I tried to teach you responsibility. You chose not to learn." That 30-day period was psychological warfare. Derek and Haley still didn't pack, still didn't leave, clearly believing Lydia would crack and override the court order somehow. So I prepared for the next phase of my revenge. I contacted their biological father, a man who'd moved to Arizona years ago and barely maintained contact. I sent him copies of the court order, the documentation of their behavior, and a very clear message. "Your children are about to be homeless because they refused to be adults. You can step up now, or you can explain to them later why you didn't." He called them, apparently furious, but told them he didn't have room for them. Another door closed. I also quietly reached out to a few local businesses and let them know that 2 young adults with 0 work history might be applying soon, and perhaps they could keep their applications on file for future consideration. I wasn't sabotaging them completely, just making sure the job hunt wasn't easy. On day 30, when they still hadn't left, I called the sheriff's department to enforce the eviction order. 2 deputies arrived at 9 a.m. They were professional, calm, and completely unmoved by Haley's tears or Derek's attempts to argue. One deputy explained they had 30 minutes to gather personal belongings they could carry, and anything left behind would be stored for 30 days before disposal. Watching Derek and Haley frantically stuff clothes into garbage bags while sheriff's deputies stood in my living room was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. Derek kept muttering that this was illegal, that I'd regret it, that he'd sue. One of the deputies, a guy about my age, said quietly, "You had 90 days to figure this out, son. Nobody's fault but your own." They loaded their bags into a beat-up car driven by some kid I'd never met. Haley begged Lydia one last time to stop this. Lydia, tears streaming down her face, said, "I love you, but I can't protect you from your own choices anymore. Figure it out." Then they drove away. No apology, no acknowledgement, just gone. The silence after they left was profound. Noah and Ella came downstairs cautiously. Ella asked, "Are they coming back?" I knelt down to her level. "Not unless they learn to treat people with respect. Right now, this house is for people who contribute and care about each other." Over the next weeks, the change in my kids was dramatic. Noah started doing homework without being asked. His grades improved. His attitude shifted. Ella stopped talking about dropping out and started bringing home A's again. The house felt lighter, calmer. It confirmed what I'd known. Derek and Haley had been poisoned. But my revenge wasn't finished. 3 weeks later, Derek called Lydia asking for $1,500 for a security deposit on an apartment. I was standing next to her when the call came in on speaker. I shook my head firmly. Lydia said, "No, Derek. You need to figure this out yourself." He called her a terrible mother and hung up. I then sent carefully edited portions of my documentation to their father, showing exactly how they'd treated their mother and acted in our home. He called them afterward, furious, and refused to let them move in with him. I also anonymously sent screenshots of the fraud scheme Haley had been teaching Noah to a few of their friends' parents. Not to get her criminally charged, but to let people know who she really was. Within days, several friends had distanced themselves. 2 months later, Derek filed a small claims suit for wrongful eviction and emotional distress, demanding $5,000. My lawyer sent back the court order, the documented evidence, and a politely worded letter suggesting that if Derek pursued this, we'd countersue for defamation based on his social media posts. The case was dismissed within 2 weeks. 6 months after the eviction, we were invited to Thanksgiving at Lydia's sister's house. Derek and Haley were there, looking rougher, thinner, and tired. When we walked in, Derek couldn't help himself. "Hey, Plan B, Dad? Still kicking people out?" I'd brought a folder just in case. I set it on the table and opened it. Court orders, their own texts mocking me, photos of damage they'd caused, bank statements showing what I'd spent on them. I slid it across. "Actually, I'm done kicking people out. But since you brought it up, everyone should see exactly why it happened." The room went silent. Lydia said firmly, "They needed to see this. Actions have consequences." It's been over a year now. Derek works at a hardware store. Haley's at a community college. They don't speak to me. I don't care. My kids are thriving. My marriage is stronger. And every time I pass their empty bedrooms, now a gym and craft room, I smile. People ask if I regret it. The answer is no. I didn't just evict 2 adults. I protected my children, saved my marriage, and taught a lesson. Nobody calls you Plan B and expects you to stay Plan A. So, was I wrong? Drop your verdict. Because this is the story I'll tell my kids one day. Not about cruelty, but about boundaries. Some people are worth fighting for. Others are worth fighting off. That's Plan B, and it worked perfectly.